Building online sales in China. Now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Kitty Boo in Shanghai. E-commerce is a flourishing industry in China. Consumers have embraced the internet's ability to offer comparison shopping and product research. And marketers are eager to expand their operations beyond flagship stores in established markets like Beijing and Shanghai. Last year on Thoughtful China, we looked at some of the reasons online shopping has grown so quickly in China and examined the best KPIs to know if your e-commerce strategy is working. Today on our show, we're looking at e-commerce from a different angle. The hurdles in this industry has to overcome, such as privacy, counterfeiting, user data protection, payment systems, and distribution. And Lak Tram, Digital Strategy Director at Web2 Asia, will have a thought or two about why Chinese love shopping online. But first with us is Frank Levin, Chairman and CEO of Export Now. So Frank, you set up a company called Export Now.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what this company does?
Sure. What we do is we provide e-commerce services in China for the foreign companies so that any foreign company can now post and sell on Tmall in China as easily as they can post in their home market. And this means about 6 different things. It means inbound logistics, we bring it in from the United States or wherever. We do customs clearance and label and compliance issues. We do warehouse operations and fulfillment. We do the whole web design. We'll typically start by taking the home market web page, the typeface, the photos, the videos. We'll put it up on Tmall for them, translate it, adapt it for the Chinese market. We'll do digital marketing, outreach, social media for them, last mile delivery, collect renminbi, and then remit back US dollars to the US company. So a US company can now run a Tmall store, Tmall sales operation from their office in the United States. It means China is now the easiest market in the world to enter for foreign consumer products.
So what made you leave politics and a career in PR politics and then join business world and founded this e-commerce company?
Well, I had a set of skills from government that I thought in some respects were very transferable because a lot of the issues on customs clearance, regulatory approval, and compliance really come from a government policy background, and it's important for the foreign exporter, the U.S. company or wherever, to be able to understand Chinese regulations and adhere to them. So that's not a bad background. But in truth, what happened was it's the end of the administration I was serving. The government I was with in Washington, the Bush administration, left office, and the appointees that came with President Bush left with him. So my skills are that I understand commerce and marketing in China, and I have a finance background in China, and what can I do to be helpful? And I think e-commerce was a great opportunity.
Who are your main clients? Are they smaller brands in a niche area, or are they big
mid-size?
brands?
Mid-size. We'd say companies that have a strong product slate, but not strong distribution. We can offer the distribution in China. So these would typically be retail-oriented, consumer-oriented brands that have between maybe $100 million and $1 billion in sales. We have companies over that number, more mid-size, larger companies, but it typically be around $1 billion to $100 million.
From your own experience, what do you think foreign companies need help from to set up e-commerce companies in China?
Sure. The challenge is that there's a series of mechanical tasks that unless you have local familiarity, local competency, it's all new to you. So for example, as I mentioned, customs clearance, local registration, even renting a warehouse locally. If your company can only sell maybe $1 million or $2 million online in China, it's very difficult to put somebody into Shanghai to interview warehouse operators, to rent space, to hire a warehouse operator and so forth. Web design might be the same activity. Express company, last mile delivery. So there's a series of reasonably small mechanical steps that can be just burdensome if the company's based in the United States and they simply can't afford the management bandwidth to set all of that up. So we've set it up.
From your experience, what are the mistakes that you've made in the early stage setting up business here? Or what are the challenges?
Well, I think there are a lot of challenges. In a way, it's sort of bad news, good news, meaning the fact that it took us 6 months or so to register and maybe closer to 12 months to put together, we think, a pretty good team is just a reminder that it's never easy, right? And if you're coming in from overseas and you have to do all of this, it can be quite a challenge. I don't know if we made any one killer mistake or really went dramatically the wrong way. One change we made, though, to illustrate that point, Kitty, is we initially started marketing in the United States. We found it more fruitful to market to U.S. companies already in China, meaning the company's already committed to China, they're already selling in China, but they don't have an e-commerce presence yet in China because e-commerce is a separate set of skills of fulfillment and CRM activity and digital marketing, and they just haven't done it yet. So we can do all of that for them. So one change we made over the last year was shift in emphasis from marketing directly to companies in the US to marketing to the China manager of the US company.
Are Alibaba's Taobao and Tmall the only major platforms that foreign e-commerce companies should know or consider about operating in China?
Well, every company's a bit different, so I'm not sure if there's a one-size-fits-all, but I'd say in general the answer to that question is going to be yes, because those platforms together account for well over 50% of the e-commerce market. So that's not a bad place to be. And it's no surprise that Levi's store in China is on Tmall, that Nike store is on Tmall, that Sony's on Tmall, that Disney, that Apple and so forth, that the great global consumer brands go to Tmall. That is the premier site. And that's where our store is as well. So it's not a bad place to start. So I'd say in general the answer is going to be that's your solution.
Mm-hmm. Who are some of the lower tier online shoppers in the country? Who are these people?
Well, look, there's a range. The number of internet users in China is hundreds of millions of people. And even though it's going to skew toward younger people and better educated people, within that mix, there's going to be less affluent folks. I think you'd say our market segment, since we handle foreign brands, that tends to be in the mass premium space, not very low end or not everyday use. But I think you do have, to your question, Katie, I think you do have, especially in second tier cities, people whose preferred shopping channel, even for everyday items, toothpaste and so forth, is online, and those would be more mass products. That's not so much the space we're in, which tends to be a little more boutique or premium or niche oriented. For example, we sell Washington State and California State wines. Now these might, probably most of them sell between $20 US and $50 US. Not a luxury product, but that would be sort of mass premium.
Is China's group buying phenomenon fading, or do you still advise clients about how sort of team buying?
No, I think group buying is still in early days. I think it's growing. I would say this, group buying is a useful tool, but to my mind it's an augmentation of your strategy. Don't build your entire marketing strategy around group buying. You need to come up with a product slate and a marketing plan and a strategy that will sustain your company year-round. So you're always growing, you're always serving the customer, you're always introducing new products. In that mix, group buying can be a useful step to broaden your appeal. But I wouldn't start with group buying. I would start by saying, what are our core products that work in China, and how do we contact the Chinese consumers, and how do we present the value of our product to these consumers? Then I can talk about special deals, special promotions, group buying, and so forth.
What would be some of your advice that you would give for foreign companies trying to operate in China's e-commerce sector?
I would say the single biggest mistake, or the most frequently encountered mistake, that foreign companies make in China is the mistake of nothing. They do nothing different. They just say, oh, we have a great product, people like us, let's just transplant that to China. By the way, that might be largely true. That's not a bad assumption to start with. But it misses the fact that there probably have to be some adjustments made in product slate, in product features, maybe in pricing, maybe in distribution model, and to have market awareness and understand and follow and test the market and get feedback mechanism, I think, is a mistake, because no two markets are 100% identical, right? And there's going to be all sorts of differences in this market that will help the company perform better. If it can understand what the consumer wants and follow the consumer, it's going to get a better outcome.
Thank you, Frank, for being on Thoughtful China.
Thanks, Kitty.
Let's take a break to hear from Lak Tran, Digital Strategy Director at Web2 Asia, about why Chinese love shopping online. When we come back, a panel of experts will tell us what the future holds for China's e-commerce industry.
Chinese consumer loves shopping online because they have so many new choices and can easily integrate shopping into their current online habits. As a result, shopping online is becoming a seamless part of their daily life, both during work hours and spare time. Let's take a deeper look into who these consumers are and why they engage so heavily in online purchases. In terms of demographics, we see currently two types of online shoppers, the Baifumei and Guafushuai, which literally means good-looking, rich, and refers to the urban elites who are largely educated professionals, and the grassroots, a popular term for novice internet users. research shows that even though online shoppers in Tier 4 cities, those grassroots shoppers, have lower average income, the amount they spend online tend to be similar to those of shoppers in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. This translates into a higher wallet share for online spending in lower tier cities, and the main driver here is access to greater assortments of goods online than offline. While pricing remains the real key factor in around 50% of all purchases for both groups, it may not be the most crucial motivators for online purchases in lower tier cities. Equally important are convenience, time-saving shopping, fast delivery, and up to a quarter of e-commerce demand in China is for product consumers cannot find in physical store. Lastly, we see an increased reason for consumer to buy online as leading retailers start to develop a true multi-channel platform integrating the online and offline shopping experience.
Well, thanks, Lak. We're back in our studio with Castro Lee, Digital Creative Director at Edelman, Patrick Deloy, Executive Director of Bluecom Solutions, and Wilson Chen, Manager for Market Insight, China, Kantar Retail. Thank you for coming in today to talk about e-commerce in China. It's a booming industry. Let's start talking about some of the main drivers for this fast-growing industry in China. Well, Castro, from your experience, e-commerce obviously has a powerful influence over marketing online in China today. What are the main mistakes you've seen companies made drawing that fine line between branding online and building an e-commerce business?
Well, I wouldn't say mistakes. Everyone's right now still in very much the trailblazing stage. So there are still a lot of learnings that they can gain. But from what I've observed, it's not easy to do branding when you're launching an e-commerce. Because currently the e-commerce scene in China is very much a discounted type of marketplace. Everyone's relying on discounts, freebies to drive sales, especially if they are based on Taobao or Tmall. This is not a long-term sustainable strategy because the thing is that it sort of limits the power of the brand. The brand is less premium in this type of marketplace. And the concern right now is that some of the e-commerce scene, especially the popular ones, there are concerns about whether the goods are really the real thing. And this will have more impact on branding if it's not done properly. So currently, I do think that companies will move into a dual strategy. They're going to have their own e-commerce platform while also working with popular C2C marketplace.
Well, you just mentioned a couple of the key questions I wanted to follow up on, including counterfeiting and also the fact that the industry heavily relies on discounting and so on. But let me first ask you another question. A key question for a lot of companies today is what should be the right strategy? Do we need an actual physical store first, or does that strategy work?
Well, I think, from my perspective, we do work with a lot of international clients. Some of them, obviously, they already have their structure set up in China. They already have brick and mortar stores, so they have their legal structures already set up. That obviously makes it a lot easier in terms of logistics, in terms of licenses you need, etc. So basically, you just need the IT platform and, of course, reliable partners to set up your whole e-commerce strategy. And you can start selling, right? But if you're completely new to China, of course, then you got to solve completely different issues, right? Well, this is something that we see more and more because obviously people see, people in Europe, people in the US, they see the numbers, right? They see 400 million potential online shoppers in China in 2014 or something, and they think, I want to take part in that, right? Because, the thinking is like this. Even if I just sell to 0.001%, it's still quite some sales, right? But they, of course, got to solve different kind of issues. They got to bring the goods into a country first, right? They got to do the marketing, branding, etc. For them, obviously, it's more difficult, and in a legal point of view, usually things go a little bit more slowly in China, right? But on the other hand, time to market is very important, right? So usually they try to find like a middle way, maybe going through the marketplaces first, right, without setting up their e-commerce, their own e-commerce structure yet, but at the same time working also on their own channel, because just as Castro said, for your own marketing efforts, right, you need your own channels too, because at the end, if you're going through Tmall, Taobao, etc., all these marketplaces, you're not in control of the marketing, right? And it's all very much price and discount based, really.
To add on to what Yes said, I do think that the answer is actually not that easy to answer. But from what I noticed, the key trend right now is O2O, online to on-site. Any new brands coming to the marketplace must pursue an e-commerce and store strategy. Because when it comes to branding, having a store in China is probably the best way to brand. And the e-commerce part is probably to allow consumers to access the brand from cities, provinces that don't have their stores. This is basically why e-commerce is such a boom, big thing in China. Recently, I had the pleasure of going through some of the latest research on where e-commerce is concerned, and that is a very interesting behavior. In Tier 1, consumers normally go to an e-commerce portal once. They have very little repeat purchase. The second purchase normally happens at the store. It's just that if they like the product they got from e-commerce store, they're very tempted to visit the store so they can immerse themselves in the brand experience, the brand packaging, so that they feel that they are really part of the brand experience. The one that has the most repeat visits on e-commerce stores are people from Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, because they
when they do not have the access to the physical store.
Yes, so it depends on their go-to-market China strategy. Is Tier 1 your key target audience, your market? Then you need a store and e-commerce strategy. Tier 2, Tier 3, you can build your e-commerce platform first.
Wilson, do you agree with that?
Yeah, normally I think that's a good idea, because when e-commerce launch in China, it's a comparison of offline and online. And I think generally speaking, online has a very powerful impact to the brick and modern brick stores. And we expect that it will become further. And but in China, you know, the online and offline, it's a little bit complicated situation here compared with the West. And you can see that if we take an example like Walmart US, that has when Walmart US launched their online platform, they have thousands of offline stores. But here in China, Walmart only have 200 and 300 stores. But here the online is booming here. Talking about e-commerce, we need to take e-commerce seriously. I mean, not only because e-commerce is booming, they have a large scope of sales, shopper changes their behavior, but really take it serious. It's gonna change it's a revolutionary change. And you need to think about how you need to set up a long-term strategy instead of winning short money, short sales. Take example that Amazon takes 7 or 8 years in US to earn the money. But here, when you set up the e-commerce, don't expect you will win the money in 1 or 2 years.
But when you have a long-term strategy, do you get stuck into the cycle of always being on the discount and always trying to sell something cheap and never actually make a profit?
That's a very good point. It really depends on what's the current market strategy. For example, Nike is going to set up more stores in China based on the discounting strategy. That I would assume that e-commerce strategy is going to be very much based on that as well. But the thing is, that's that particular product strategy. But for most clients, I think they need to take note of this trend that e-commerce is now part of integrated marketing communication. It is the call to action. It is the conversion stage that's necessary. And they have to look very carefully at the way Chinese consumers are really behaving on the commerce scene. It is so interesting. There's this trend called showrooming. They go to the store, they picked out a few stuff they like, but they won't buy on the spot. Then they go online, they look at what their friends talk about the products, and then they buy it from the e-commerce store. So this consumer journey is so very different these days. And I did tell some of my clients with stores and e-commerce that I need to integrate everything together, because people don't use social, mobile, or e-commerce on 3 different media. They're using it all together on one platform of choice. So this integration is a combination of sales, advertising, communication, PR, and they have to be prepared to move their business in that direction for e-commerce to really work out in the long term. Otherwise, it always will be short-term discount strategy.
One brief sentence, just one sentence to describe the biggest challenge for e-commerce companies operating in China.
I think right now the biggest challenge for at least the big e-commerce sites in China is actually turning current investments into profits, because most of them are not profitable yet.
Similar answer, but my answer is more that they have no way of quantifying returns on investment.
Yeah, I would say like be patient and have a long-term mindset.
One last question. We might be running out of time, but I still would like to ask this. Are Chinese consumers more and more worried about data protection, consumer data protection?
That's a very good question. I would have to say no. The reason because, if you notice, there was a Forrester study, emerging markets like China, we are 3 times more likely to update compared to our counterparts in USA or Europe. And with this shy, showing off trend, people love to let people know what they're doing, what they're buying, why they love it. It's part of this coming of age thing, I think, for the Chinese netizen, and I think it will still continue for some time.
Thank you very much for being on Thoughtful China today. That was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that wraps it up for today. Be sure to subscribe to us on Tudo and YouTube. You can also follow us on Weibo and Twitter and join our LinkedIn group. See you again.